So I think we are going to change this format a little bit more interactive, and certainly would like to, to have this more like a discussion, right? So, well, good morning, good evening to everyone. Welcome to this discussion here. And Stan and Sunil, thank you for joining us. And it's a privilege to have you both join us for this discussion around, as we are actually almost at an inflection point where the enterprises are going beyond the experimentation stage for AI agent adoption, and the need for the risk management and the governance around is actually increasing, right? So Stan, maybe we'll actually jump right with you. So you're the co-founder of Calibra, a visionary, a leader in the space. Let me start with you to hear your perspective on what you're focused on and what is on top of your mind nowadays.
Hey, Sanjeev, and hi everyone. Stan from Colibra here. What is the question, Sanjeev? What is on my mind these days?
Yes.
I always got 1,000 things on my mind, but I think one of them in particular that I believe is on many people's minds because, for the last 3 years, it seems like every conversation is about this topic, whether you are at the bakers or the butchers or anywhere else. That is the AI topic. But specifically, Sanjeev, for me, this topic, I want to make it a little bit more specific, which is the platform shift that the AI topic represents. Platform shifts being these big, 5 or 10 year cycles that happen in technology every 5 or 10 years, right? So that's mostly on my mind. What is that platform shift today and how to best navigate it?
That's great. I think, as you said, we hear this topic across every vector right now. So this is certainly going to have a large impact on everyone's life. And Sunil, you've been a speaker in many forums around AI governance, and off late especially, right? I mean, I know you've had other engagements too, but off late has been more around AI governance, and you're actually in conversations with data and AI leaders. What are you hearing from those conversations?
Yeah, I think what is old is new. Stan and I were reflecting a few days ago, way back in 2012 when I had left IBM, and Colibra was a much smaller company than it is today, right? They were thinking about data governance, data stewards, data lineage, compliance around data. And honestly, what's old is new because now you still have sort of the same concepts, but slightly different. You've got AI agents now, right? But now you have to think about connectors for those AI agents. Remember, Stan, in the old days with Colibra, oh, I need a connector to Tableau. I need a connector to this new data source. Now you have all these different data sources, right? Agents. You have agents embedded in agent platforms, OpenAI, Databricks, Salesforce, Agentforce, ServiceNow. You've got to bring all that agent metadata in. Then you've got to deal with all the risk associated with those agents. So use the agent metadata to conduct risk and then understand lineage, right? What is old is new, lineage from the agent to the tools to maybe unstructured data or structured data. That can change at runtime, right? So understanding operational metadata as well. So yeah, that's my perspective. I don't understand. I mean, this what is old is new, and what you observed in the past with Colibra and what's current right now. I mean, your perspective.
Well, I love the way you package it, right? So the quote unquote old wine in new barrels, and of course there's new wine as well. But you're completely correct, right? Sunil, if I look at what happened in data governance in those early days, and I don't want to make it specifically about a feature or function necessarily, but just what happened in organizations, right? It was like a new discipline. So there was unclarity on, role and responsibility and the why or how to do it and how to measure it. And that same dynamic now echoes with AI. People ask, well, how do I need to deal with this? Who's responsible for it? How do we organize it? So you're seeing that AI governance and data governance, they have like an echo across time. That leads me to believe that indeed some old is new and some new is old in the sense that some governance principles from data governance will carry over, right? Because AI and data are hand in hand, and some new ones will exist. And the new ones, Sunil, I mean, you mentioned agents just there. But before we get to the agent, which in my opinion is a new phenomenon, but also a very old one, right? Because when I studied back in the olden days, you know, agents and multi-agent systems was a research discipline as part of the broader AI space. So now it's back, right? But what you're saying is on point there, right? Is the maps that we would see, like for example, a data warehouse map or an analytics map. It has sources on the left-hand side and targets on the right-hand side, and then stuff in the middle. And then you want to have like lineage or whatever over it and control over it. And now, if you look at maps that vendors or VCs are bringing out, it's sort of the same map, right? There's all the same names and logos are there, and there's new ones and there are of course new categories coming up too. But a lot of the same phenomenons are happening because, to your point, an agent also needs to speak to the systems of records or maybe the BI systems or the warehousing systems or whatnot. So yeah, it's interesting to see, but it remains equally challenging. I mean, for you, for us, for the market as a whole, it remains equally challenging because I mean, when it started, we were all talking about LLMs and doing prompt engineering, and then of course, just like with a car, if somebody only gives you the engine, or just like with a computer, somebody gives you only the CPU, you still have to start building the parts around it to make the engine or the CPU work. So the LLM is the CPU, if you will, and now people are putting a harness around it, the agent. And tomorrow, to your point, you have multi-agent systems, and the metadata is a very important instrument for understanding what those agents are up to, how they're connected, but also even further in the context of metadata. Sunil, we've talked often about active metadata, very popular topic at Gartner. But when it comes to agents and AI, active metadata is controlling these systems or keeping them within safety parameters. So it's getting more and more important.
So
Excellent.
maybe we will actually double click on a few topics actually that you brought up, Stan, right? So maybe the one thing that actually caught my attention is that as we go through this evolution right now, the business challenges and the needs and the problems that it seems to have kind of moving in parallel, right? I mean, maybe at a different pace altogether. But I think probably one big difference that is happening right now is that agents are actually not just consuming information. It can potentially modify information. It can change the outcome. It can change potentially the way in which processes are actually being delivered as well. Is that actually what is changing, complicating the landscape, saying, hey, who in the organization owns this? Who in the organization is responsible for driving the direction? Do you see that as actually making this whole landscape a little bit more complex?
Well, it's definitely a factor. So I'll touch on it in a minute. I think there's a bunch of factors, right? So we'll zoom in on Sanjeev on what you just said, but let's run through a number of factors. First, you have a technology space that is rapidly evolving. I mean, like I said earlier, right? First we talk about LLMs. Next year we're talking about agents. Next year we're talking about swarms. So that's a very fast technology evolution. So that in itself is hard to keep up. A second one is the enormous pressure that comes with the topic. Because think about it, Sanjeev, you're a CEO of a board or a small or a large company. It doesn't matter. You're home. You see a kid talking to an AI for like hours on end about mushrooms and the beach, and I don't know what they're doing, right? But they're sharing their inner monologue with these AI beasts, and then doing all sorts of productive things with it as well. And then they go back to their companies and like, I want this in my company. So there's enormous pressure across every function, across every business and every industry to do something with AI, right? Do something with AI. So people are doing something with AI. So that is also a factor. And then to the point that you mentioned, so I mean, there's many other complicating factors, but the point that you mentioned is also a very big one. Because think about it, right? If AI today, agents, we're just going to group it all under the banner of AI for sake of conversation. But if AI today provides automation of things that were not automatable before, whatever those things are. So now you can automate more. That means inevitably that the delineation of a job's responsibilities are going to shift, and that means that the business processes are going to have to shift. So now think about that ownership complexity, right? So if you're the owner of the business process and your business process needs to change, or it gets subsumed altogether in some automated step, well, now you're talking about an automation that potentially replaces you, your function, and then you're going to fight tooth and nail against that change as well. So I think definitely that complicates ownership. So, but it's not the only factor. There's a number of variables that make it messy.
Makes sense.
And then it needs to be messy also, in my opinion, because it's a very new sexy widget, this AI thing, right? And it can do a lot of things. We need to, master this new discipline of what I would call intelligent systems in a way. But um, ultimately, it's new, it's hot. There's a lot of attention on it. There's a lot of money on it. So it sort of feels like we're in a race, right? And in a race where you have to have a horse in the game. In other words, you have to make experiments with this new technology. If you're not experimenting, I mean, but if it's not today, then tomorrow. I mean, you have to do it late or early, it doesn't matter. It's inevitable. And experiments come with messiness and come with failure. So, for example, Sanjeev, when I see reports, well, 80% of AI projects fail, I think, well, that's normal. We're in the creative destruction phase of this new platform shift. So it will be messy. It needs to be messy.
That's a good segue. So when you actually talk about that creative destruction, and then the enterprises needs to start adopting, whichever way it is actually going to go. I'm leaving the consumer side aside. Then actually comes, well, what should be a governance model? What should actually be your overarching directions, right? So, Sunil, from your perspective, are the enterprises actually really thinking on those lines right now when they're transitioning from that creative destruction phase to now I'm building, for productivity improvements? Are they actually thinking about it right now? What are you hearing from, risk
Yeah,
officers and data officers?
I don't think so, right? Because a lot of them are thinking maybe when they're implementing AI use cases, it's very waterfall-like, right? Will enterprises are not comfortable with 80% failure rates. In fact, Palantir came up with this new role called a forward deployment engineer. So they took a number of their AI engineers and put them in the business. And they said, let's prototype something before and kill it before it's even ready to go into production. But that's not the way companies think. They think, we'll come up with an idea, we'll get funding for it, we'll put it in the budget, then we'll go implement it. So I think that's the challenge, right? Look at the pace. A lot of these large companies today are not used to dealing with this new modality. Like, see what happened 2 days ago with one of the startup CEOs just wrote a blog about wealth management and agents for wealth management. And all of a sudden, the stock prices of many of these companies didn't do so well, right? Because people are thinking now I can have agents do all this. The counterpoint is I spent plenty of time at IBM in a previous life. And guess what? Everyone said, IBM is dead. And now what, 30, 40, 50 years after cloud, you still have mainframes. So I think, the point is agents will come in, but then they have to be integrated into the system, right? There'll be a portion of people who are happy to have agents maybe run their stock trades, etc. But on the other hand, there's some risks that go with that.
There's
Yeah.
absolutely risks, Sunil. I mean, I was at an AI event in Antwerp just 2 weeks ago. There was some various speakers. It was quite interesting. But one of the things that came out is that, for example, Claude, which is successful, right? It has access to all of the Linux commands. Now, the
Yeah.
Linux operating system is very rich and powerful and capable, but it's also organized in a way with separation of concerns and security, and not to make it, a safe system to use if you know what you're doing, right? But now what they're doing is like, oh, just give Claude access to all of Linux commands, which means it can do everything on the internet that it wants if you would let it, right? And that's exactly what happened in some of that social media noise that is coming out of
Both.
AI
Yeah.
mandate.
Yeah.
Just give it a computer with root access and let it do whatever you want. That's a bad idea. That's a bad idea. but people do it because it's cool and exciting and it's new and it can be done. So of course somebody's going to be doing it, but it's a bad idea because I mean it would be like saying here's a child and give the child the Linux root command of a server connected to the internet with a lot of resources. Well, weird stuff is going to happen, of course. Um,
So if you wouldn't give a human access to all those privileges, why would you give an agent access to those privileges? That might be a way to think about it, right? So
Yeah,
I
and
think,
I think the agent is fine. I mean, Sanjeev, you also touched on the governance topic, which we can elaborate on for a very long time, and we will, right? But for example, what Anthropic is doing, they say, okay, we will have a constitution for the agents. And okay, I believe that maybe this can help guide and they can develop some safety parameters, like it'll operate within this window of whatever number, right? But ultimately, the bigger system around it is going to need more than, an MD file with a constitution in it, right? So we as humans are still responsible for the systems that we put live.
yeah, that's interesting. You want to talk about the Constitution, Sanjeev, a little bit?
Yeah.
Because,
So I was saying that's that's another aspect, right? Because now I think as that creative element happens within the industry, each of the large platforms who are actually really trendsetting this, the frontier models, they're all actually going to come up with their own definitions and specifications as to what is the definition of an AI agent? What should actually be, what should actually, identify an agent by itself? So it looks like the industry is actually, trying to create, obviously for natural reasons, doing its own standards right now. But that lack of standard is going to have a huge impact in the near term than actually in the long term. Would you agree with that? Sunil, what's
yeah,
your take on
yeah.
that? Yeah.
So I have a few slides. Let me share a few slides because that might be instructive. So what we've done is we've created an open source agent metadata specification. Stan was kind enough to contribute to it. It's on GitHub. It's called the Agent Metadata Specification. And what it does is it starts out by saying, what's the definition of an agent, right? So you see, I've got an agent with identity and configuration. An agent uses an agent. An AI use case might use an agent. An application might use an agent. A business process might use an agent. I won't go through everything, but you've got MCP servers. Agents might use tools, data sources, knowledge sources. Agents have memory that could extend beyond a particular session, so so-called context. LLM models, prompt templates. And by the way, we did this 3 weeks ago. It's already outdated. We're going to add more in there because the moment we showed it, I showed it to a company, a large retailer, and they said, oh, wait a second. We have all the thousands of devices that might be monitoring our parking lots, might be monitoring our stores, and we have agents that are monitoring the video. Oh, wait a second. So now I have the concept of physical AI, and I have agents embedded in the physical AI. All of a sudden now, there's that aspect to it. So interesting, right? So we're going to update that. Then what we, OWASP, basically an industry body for cybersecurity, has come up with a framework called AI Vulnerability Scoring System, AIVSS. It's a 97-page document, very well written. But if you want to score an agent properly, you have to consider 220 attributes for an agent, right? All the way from context, does it have goals, does it have autonomy, does it interact with other agents? So think about if you've got tens of thousands of agents, what Stan called agent swarms. Now you're going to have to think of tens of thousands of agents with at least 220 attributes. It's a nightmare. But what you need is you're going to need all that metadata for the agent, configuration metadata, operational metadata, and that's a challenge. So a lot of these different agent platforms don't necessarily produce agent metadata at the right level. They don't all, like, for example, agent instructions are pretty important. You probably need admin access to get the agent instructions. But if you don't have agent instructions, you probably are not going to be able to risk assess whether it's got the right goals, whether it's autonomy. So Google has an agent-to-agent A2A protocol. As part of that, they've got an agent card. So when Stan talked about the constitution of an agent, that would be an agent card. It's a JSON file, right? And what we've done is we've mapped these the agent metadata spec to the agent card in terms of out-of-the-box attributes as well as extended authenticated attributes. So some of you may not want to read JSON, but this is a JSON. So for example, Colibra's got a number of clients in medical devices. So now if you think about it, in the medical device industry, some of the Food and Drug Administration says if you're a medical device provider and you're providing agents that do something clinical, like for example, in this case, there's a company called Prognosis, and they'll detect, they use 22 proprietary data attributes to detect the onset of sepsis, blood poisoning. That is considered a medical device by the Food and Drug Administration. So now you will probably need extended attributes to define that medical device, right? Like a universal device identifier. So now if you think about it, Google agent card is very narrow, but we've defined a set of additional attributes cross industry and then some attributes by industry. So what are the attributes for medical devices? What are the attributes when you think about model risk in a bank, for example? So that's something we wanted to just talk about, right? So I'll stop there and see if Stan had anything to
No, no,
comment.
no, no. Bring it back, Sunil. Please, can you bring up that asset model or the operating model, the diagram that you had up? Because I know
Yeah.
I love seeing those things, and I know people love picking on them a little bit. But then, as we're talking, and everyone, feel free to live right now or later on add comments online, right? Because Sanjeev, the point you were making earlier. Um, is correct. So again, Sunil, you said old wine, new battles, everything old is new again. If we go back to previous platform shifts and we can look at self-service BI and data warehousing in the cloud or on-premise, it doesn't matter, right? If you go to all of those technology times, and they're still here, but they're not going to go away overnight, obviously. But if you look to this previous one, they also had metadata and they also had standardization initiatives. Even to the point, there's the old XKCD comic, right? Oh, we have 20 standards. That's a problem. Let's get to work, everyone. Now we're going to make the one standard that rules them all, and then boom, you have 21 standards, right? So, but in like the BI data warehousing world, there's an abundance of them. So clearly, the market felt that there was some sort of interchange needed between the different tools at that time. The common warehouse model, there's Beaver standards, there's OMG, there's ISO. There's an abundance of them, and new ones are being built. I think Snowflake came out with OSI recently, Databricks came out with one. But essentially, if we project that all into the new, we know there was a reason that people put effort on getting those standards in place, right? Because they needed the system to speak with one another and exchange metadata. So now, obviously, this is also going to be needed in this new AI/agent world. So Sanjeev and Sunil, first of all, great work on getting this out of the gate and making it open source so people can contribute to it, because this will definitely be a moving target, right? So again, in the beginning, the AI metadata would be around use cases and prompts. Next, around agent, they have all sorts of parameters. And then we're looking at the agent system. So, you'll need parameters from the system. To your point, Sunil, also, if it's a physical AI, if some sort of robot of sorts, I mean, we always think about the humanoid robot, right? But there's a really wide variety of physical AI that is present. I mean, CES was full of robot devices. So clearly, there's going to be parameters that need to come out of those systems that we're going to need, to exchange information between those systems, but also just at the basic level to have transparency, right? So you know what that thing is that sits out there doing something, and you know what the parameters are of that thing. You need to know this. Otherwise, you can't, get visibility on it, and otherwise you can't hope to achieve control over it. So the fact that we're in this fast-moving space means that that moving target of the metadata between the agents is going to need to move fast as well, right? So this year we'll have more requirements than you'll have last year. But we know from the past it's needed. The past you just had a lot more time to build them out. Now you'll have less time to move them out, because if you look at adoption curves in the industry, I mean, there's plenty of those. You've all seen curves like this, right? So it shows an adoption curve like of the iPhone. How fast did the iPhone reach the whole world? How fast did the internet reach the whole world? And then you're seeing that those adoption curves, technology spreads faster across the world than it ever did before, especially this AI widget. So it just means that operational, metadata around agents is going to be needed more faster than it did before.
It's true. I think this also underlines the fact that actually when Sunil brings up that asset model in there, right? So there is so much of wealth of information across various sectors and functions within an enterprise. So you can look at this metadata not being just purely from a governance perspective or a risk perspective. This has actually got a legal implication. This has actually got a security implication. This has got privacy implication, just pure asset management implication. So probably going back to the topic that you brought up earlier, Stan, this actually just necessitates the fact that actually, if you don't have the metadata y- across the functions, you're actually going to face challenges in terms of how you're going to manage that with an enterprise. And probably one of the other things that I actually feel is also that, I mean, there is always this question about, is governance an external imposed mandate, or is that an internal mandate, right? I mean, you need to do that, for a better functioning of the enterprise, right? So I think, Sunil or Stan, I mean, any comments on saying that should this actually be, should the enterprises be looking and saying that I'm not doing this for a regulatory reason. I'm not doing this for, being for the reason that it has to be compliant. Is this a necessity that you need to manage just for a better operating model?
Yeah, so I'll answer. I can take a first step pass at it. Clearly, the EU AI Act was out of the gate, right, with regulations around AI. They technically did not define. They have the definition in Article 3 of an AI system, but the regulators are so far behind. They've not actually extended that definition specifically for AI agents, though it would be covered, right? But a lot of that, frankly, is being watered down now with the geopolitical environment, right? The US and Europe don't want to be behind China. So I'm not sure companies can necessarily just rely on all the regulations with the stick are going to come in, at least for the next 3 years, right? And say we have to, do AI governance or AI risk because of regulation. But we talked to a chief digital officer the other day, Sanjeev, you and I, and he said the CEO said, I'm not putting any of these agents into production because I'm worried about reputational risk. I'm worried about cybersecurity risk. God knows what's happening with these agents. So I think the what is old is new, sort of like with data governance. A lot of the time, we needed the regulators to come in and say, "Oh, we need BCPS 239, we need CCPA, we need GDPR." But now, we started out initially with AI governance around EU AI Act and some of the sectoral legislation in the US. But now it's increasingly around risk, right, and making sure it doesn't take down the enterprise.
Yeah, I agree. I agree to a part. So Sunil and Sanjeev, first of all, metadata is not an end goal, to be very clear, right? There's another end goal that metadata serves. So as much as we love metadata, we must always remind ourselves and others, metadata is not for the sake of metadata, it's for the sake of a certain goal. One of those goals could indeed be, you want to have regulatory compliance around your, agent system that you put live in your organization. But I think there's plenty of regulation that already applies without us needing necessarily new AI regulation. I mean, there's consumer protections in place. If you put an AI system live and it violates consumer protection, and that existing law and regulation applies, right? It's not, you can't say, well, it doesn't apply because the AI did it. The AI is not a human being. It doesn't have responsibility. It doesn't have the liability. That's still human or organizational. But I do agree with the point, Sunil, that you made about the watered downness of the AI regulations. There's regulation in all parts of the world around AI, but
A
what
lot
you
of it in
can
Brussels.
is that it's like is being dragged out a little bit, right? They're pushing timelines back, they're softening something. So there's definitely some, pushback against the regulation and most likely a lot of lobbying happening. And clearly also the competitiveness between nations or geographies around winning this race. Now, I would say also, Sunil, I mean, I would not look at regulatory drivers for putting protections in place around your AI work, whatever it is that you do. I would not use that as a driver. Let me give you an example why. So when I hear the word I often remind myself as well as others, read AI not as artificial intelligence, but read it as ask an intern, right? Because if you look at an AI as ask an intern and you give an intern work and you take that work, or in the case of the AI being an agent, you have it do autonomy and do work instead of having you do the work for them. Well, if you have an intern do something or take that output and just pass it on to your boss or to the market, to the customer, you're making a huge mistake, right? Because you have responsibility for checking the intern's work or directing the work that it's doing in some safe way. So the same is true with AI, right? So if you don't put some sort of control framework around the AI system, whether it's big or small, whether it's full of agents and swarms or just a chatbot on your website, it doesn't matter. When you put something live, the person that puts this live is taking that risk of whatever goes wrong, right? And then you have plenty of examples of things that already went wrong. So I think if you're a responsible person in an organization with a leadership function, you're gonna want some, guardrails in place before you push the go live button. And you're gonna want to have some, safety measures to protect you from the intern saying something stupid or doing something wrong.
Yeah.
So I always like regulatory drivers because they create, urgency and they create budget and attention and they create some focus with respect to what has to be done. So they provide some guidance as well. So never, waste a good regulatory driver, obviously. But at the same time, there's really clear business reasons, like you said, Sanjeev, around, reputational risk, but plenty of other ones to do this properly. And even if there's a race and there's experimentation going on, we should not forget this, right? If you're doing a race with a real race car, you're still going to use your brakes from time to time. Otherwise, you'll hit the wall very quickly.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. All right. So I think actually, I was just looking for any questions from the attendees. I don't know whether they can see my messages, but if there's nothing else, I want to actually slowly start rounding this conversation up, saying that, and then a call to action from both of you as to what your recommendations are. In my mind, actually, from this discussion, it is actually very clear that the the pace at which the technology, the AI agent adoption is moving, it is actually rapid. It is actually at the same time also changing the way in which it's a real transformational opportunity right now, right? So the changes and the adaptation that the enterprises needs to know is not tomorrow, it is actually today, because you've got to be prepared for that. That's for me actually the biggest takeaway from. But I certainly would like to actually give some closing comments from you and your call to action. Stan, maybe start with you, and then Sunil, you follow that.
Well, my closing thoughts might be long-winded, Sanjeev, so keep
Sure.
me keep me on point and on time, right? But there's one before I start thinking about what I want to close with. I did want to touch on Sunil's point earlier because I think I heard you say chief risk officer also, right, Sunil? And that's interesting, right? Because in the data world and the data governance world, there was the chief data officer, and now we have a chief AI officer, and we'll see how that all shakes out. But the chief risk officer, somebody responsible for risk, they've been around a lot longer, right? So the fact that they're interested in this topic, I find that very interesting, and by the way, a good sign. So, and I like that what you're doing with the metadata can help us automate maybe some of that risk assessment. Because if you have metadata about the system, then you can actually to what you're doing, to the point of what you're doing, right? You can actually say, well, you we don't know whether you are automated assessment score is accurate or precise, but it's good enough for you to start maybe prioritizing which system to look at first, for example. So, and then you can, of course, fine tune any of the risk calculations or assessment. But I like that point that the chief risk officer is sort of, getting their spidey sense going with these agentic systems. That is a good, promising sign because these chief risk officers, they've been around for a while and they know how to do what needs to be done to help the organization. So if you have any perspectives there or examples, I'd love to learn. And then closing thoughts is very simple. If I can give anything away with respect to how we have to look at the world today, it's that platform shift. To your point, Sanjeev, it's about the speed, and it's about moving along with the speed, right? So again, either you choose to join early or late, it doesn't matter, but you got to join. But even if you join 3 years from now, expect that there's still going to be changes happening, because this technology shift has only just started, really.
Yeah, I think from my standpoint, it's if you were a data person in the old days or whatever it is, I think you've got to start understanding, play with the technology. Don't just read books, play with the technology, get immersed in it, and then understand from the chief risk officer perspective, the board, the CEO, how maybe what we do on a day-to-day basis, which is metadata, how does that now evolve into this agentic metadata world at scale, right? And then understand how our skills can evolve, right? So that is pretty important, I think.
Great. Go back to the basics and use the first principles when you're approaching any problem statement, right? So that's great. With that, I think actually we'll close this discussion. Thank you, Stan and Sunil, for your time, and thank you, participants, for joining us actually as well.
Thank you, Sanjeev. Thank you,
Thank
Stan.
you. Bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye bye.
Bye.